Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be continuing on the story called I Found a Secret Room in My Kitchen, and I think something lives there. I don't know how to speak. I apologize for my voice. It's very nasally today. I am sick. That's why there was a video last week. Well, actually, I don't know, because I don't know when this video is going to go up. So, whenever I missed a week, it was because I was sick. So, I guess let's just get started. Without putting too fine a point on it, I recently learned that something lives in a hidden room under my kitchen floor. I woke up in a cold sweat this morning after the cob disappeared. I had had a nightmare of a green-eyed monstrosity, lumpy and malformed, with hair and eyes like mine. The finger lingered on my peripheral even after I'd opened my eyes. Wet, wrinkly skin glistened in the morning light. I quickly squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them again, it was gone. The first thing I did was call my realtor office. They'd handled both sides of the home purchase. One way or another, they'd have records. But it didn't quite go as planned. After being on hold for a very long time, the receptionist told me, "Ma'am, we don't have a transaction for the property address this year. We handled a sale in 2015, but that's it." My head was already pounding. Can I speak to my realtor? At least I remembered her name perfectly. I could practically see her in front of me, short and vivacious, with laugh lines and proud streaks of white in her red hair. Aileen Harrington. The receptionist's I can't speak today. Confusion was nearly palpable, even over the phone. "Mrs. Harrington passed away." My heart sank. When? A hesitant intake of breath. About 2 years ago. She did handle the home purchase, but it was back in November of 2015. I thanked her and hung up. It didn't take long to make my decision. I needed to go back. Either I was insane, in which case no harm, no foul, or people were somehow trapped there. Mariah was already at work. I thought about waiting until her shift ended. I thought about asking her to come home early. I even thought about asking every single person I knew to come with me. But then I thought of the cop. I thought of the photos of the family I didn't have. If there was even a chance they were alive, I wouldn't abandon them. Nor could I consign anyone else to whatever horror show waited in that house. So I grabbed my phone and camera and went alone. I waited in my car for a few minutes. I didn't have to do this. In fact, I shouldn't be doing this. But what was the alternative? Call the police again? Wait however long it took and pray the next one didn't end up eaten out of reality? Sell the place to some other unlucky buyer? Pay the mortgage on a house I couldn't live in? Burn it down and hope I got away with it? That's what I wanted to do more than anything. But then what would happen to the people trapped inside? Finally, I got out of my car. It was another beautiful day. Buttery sunlight gilded the grass and glanced off the white paint, infusing the flowers and trees with a glow that almost looked painted. The air was warm and almost dusty sweet. All of that fell away the moment I stepped into the house, replaced with cold shadows and the sour, splintery smell of old wood varnish. The massive hole remained, bearing that strange secret room. The ladder jutted out invitingly. I took several pictures, first with my phone and then with my Instax. Each photo displayed an intact floor. Something had changed. The boards were smooth and pale in the photos, obviously freshly laid or sanded. The torn floor in the subterranean room remained of course hidden from photos, for whatever reason, but clearly visible in reality. My flashlight waited on the wooden island right where I left it. I flicked it on, tightening my grip as my hands began to shake, and descended into the room under the floor. It was much bigger now, narrow, but far too long, stretching past the beams. Reach, and I had to go all the way to the end. I had to open that door to find whoever was trapped here, and face whatever had trapped them. I walked carefully, sidestepping the rotten spots. My heart pounded as I glanced around. Things had changed drastically. Dozens of toys were strewn across the floor. Several stuffed animals were arranged in tight rows on the sofa. Beady eyes glinted in the light, impassive and not quite lifeless. I shuddered and pressed on until the beds finally came into view. 5 identical iron frames piled high with toys, filthy blankets, and broken, decayed mattresses. The dancing flashlight's beam made shadows pulse and jump. Fear overtook me, and I stopped to take a deep breath. The shadows continued to move, like things were moving on the bed. Fear overwhelmed me. I squatted and set down the flashlight. The beams stilled, and with it most of the shadows, except one. One of the beds continued to move. The pile rose and fell steadily, like something was breathing under it. My breath caught in my throat. The bed shifted suddenly. The spring squealed, and a sheaf of long hair spilled from beneath, glistening like auburn gossamer. An involuntary moan escaped my lips, shrill and horrifically loud. The pile fell still, for a moment, then grew. Toys and rusted springs and pieces of decayed foam descended onto the floor as a woman sat up, one who looked exactly like me. Her eyes and mouth were stitched shut. Wads of stuffing protruded from her ears. She stood and asked a question, muffled and wordless, of course. But there was no mistake. The up-tilted cadence of the words, and shuffled forward. Her hand flexed, closing experimentally on the thin air. I grabbed the flashlight and forced myself to my feet. It was slow and painful, like walking through water. My foot plunged into a rock pit as soon as I took a step. The toe of my shoe brought up a clump of hair. I kicked it off, whining desperately, and froze as a wood mush shifted. A thick bubble rose and popped, revealing a small wrinkled hand. It grasped blindly for the ledge. Sobbing helplessly, I turned and ran. All around me, the rot holes spread, growing to insane proportions. They bubbled and broke apart, hands and arms, but mostly hair. Curly hair, dark hair, light hair, long and short, thick and thin. All of it, slimy, wet, and rising up. I reached the ladder and hauled myself up. Hand over sweaty, slippery hand. My double followed clumsily, stumbling over toys and bubbling rot pits. Finally, I reached the upper floor. I jumped out and tried to run, but tripped and went sprawling. I rolled over, sobbing, only to see that the floor was whole. No ladder, no hidden room, just smooth, pale, freshly laid floorboards. I curled up and wept for a while. When I finally stood up, the picture book was laying on the counter, thin, glossy, and pretty, with that ominous title stamped across it in silver lettering. I had left it at Mariah's, but no matter, I had opened it hesitantly and flipped through it. The book had reshuffled itself yet again, in the process adding several more pages. I quickly found where I'd left off. Noon plays games that have funny rules, with the people who come after you, and continue to read. When people who come after you play their funny games with Noon. They divide in 2, 3, 4, 5. As so many more, all are alive. Each one of them has a different aim, but everyone plays Noon's game. Games are the way to give Noon dues, and when dues get paid, Noon leaves you clues. The people who come after you sometimes make Noon's favorite clues. If you lose the game, Noon eats you. And the people who come after you. Suddenly, a series of thumps echoed from upstairs, followed by a shrill of giggle. I immediately slammed the book shut and ran out of the house. To my horror, twilight had replaced midday. Worse, autumn had somehow overtaken spring. My apple tree dropped with clusters of ripe fruit. Small, lopsided pumpkins grew along the side of the house, covered in thick leaves and vines. Vibrant layers of pink, violet, and orange overtook the western sky. Brilliance underscored by the dark, craggy hills in the foreground. As I spun around, trying desperately to orientate myself, a car trundled carefully down the steep driveway and parked. Panic immobilized me. Should I go back into the house, stay put, run? I tried looking man excited, balancing a drink carrier and a bag of fast food. He kneed the door shut, locked the car, then approached me with a sheepish smile. There was no question. He was the man from the photos. Hey, I'm sorry for snapping at you. The smile faded. Anxiety replaced it, followed for just an instant by the resentful sadness. What's wrong? The words didn't want to come, but I finally choked them out. Who are you? Crows watched us from the almond trees in the front yard, rustling and cawing softly. The man's eyes shone in a blue twilight, tired and terribly cold. I'm going to call your sister. He went into the house. Kiva, Brandon, dinner. After a moment of helpless confusion, and I followed him just as 2 kids flew down the stairs and across the living room. I recognized them immediately. The little boy and the little girl from those pictures. Imaginary people. People who didn't exist. Except they obviously did. The girl pulled ahead, leaving her giggling brother in the proverbial dust. When he saw me, his smile widened briefly, then darkened. He stopped in the middle of the room, watching me as the girl turned on all the lights. She noticed her brother was no longer in pursuit, and turned. What's the matter? She doesn't know who we are, the boy said in a small voice. His chest began to rise and fall rapidly. Noon got us. Who's Noon? I asked immediately. Their father shot me a furious look. Guys, what did we just talk about? Brayden began to cry. It's okay, Kiva said weepingly. It's not too late. Then the man wrapped his hand around my elbow and pulled me into the kitchen. I can't let you do this to them, he hissed. You have to go somewhere, Mariah. Whoever. But you can't be here until we figure out what's wrong with you. He bit his lip and he stepped back, then rubbed his face. Something told me I should feel hurt, but I didn't know him. Didn't know any of them. Well enough to care. What I cared about was the perfectly intact kitchen floor. Are you going to tear up the floor? I asked. The man briefly pressed his hands into his face. We already did. We're done. Was there something under there? Behind me? Kiva started to cry. A room, or... Shut up, he snarled. Shut up right now. If you're seeing things, shut your eyes if you're hearing things. Stuff your ears. I can't handle you. Our kids cannot handle you. A shadow shifted weirdly on my peripheral, and I turned. Behind the kids, crouching at the foot of the stairs, was a small, misshapen creature, holding a little trident. Green eyes glimmered in the dim, then exact color and shape as mine, and the same, I realized, as the little boy's. I watched helplessly as another larger shadow crept up behind it. The bigger one had the same awful, impossible proportions and ruined skin. It was a thing from my nightmare, down to the hair and eyes. The man fell abruptly silent. I tore myself away and looked at him, wondering if he'd seen the monsters too. But no. He was transfixed by the kitchen floor. Before my eyes, dark rot bloomed across the floorboards. It started as pinpricks and swiftly expanded into vast blotches. They blossomed and spread, melting the floor away like acid. The darkness stopped just short of my feet and continued to eat through the wood. The man grabbed my hand and tried to pull me into the living room. The instant he took a step, the darkness surged forward like a tide, dissolving the ground beneath us. We fell together, landing in a shallow puddle of pulpy rot. Two little heads peered over the edge of the upper floor, staring down at us in horror. I tried to crawl away from the wet spot, but vast quantities of long, stringy hair tangled around my arms and legs. It felt alive, like 1,000 tiny, terribly strong snakes. The little girl started to climb down. Kiva, the little boy wailed. Kiva paid him no mind. She dangled briefly from the ledge. Brayden tried to grab her hands and pulled her back, but only succeeded in loosening her grip. She dropped beside me with a grunt and quickly scrambled away from the rot pool. Familiar, deafening music suddenly exploded to life. Brayden screamed. Kiva ran to me and desperately struggled with her wet hair. It felt limp when she touched it. I shook it off and stumped to my feet. She immediately moved on to her father. I watched as hair continued to writhe in the puddles. It bubbled up and broke the surface, revealing a glistening, misshapen head. Brayden screamed again. The second Kiva freed her dad, the deformed figure shot up and grabbed her, quickly dragging her down. I reached for her, but her father shoved me out of the way and grabbed her. The misshapen body threw Kiva to the side and grabbed her father, quickly and improbably submerging him. Kiva plunged her arms into the rot pool before I could do anything. Long hair and a dozen pale, wrinkled hands rose and engulfed her. Without thinking, I grabbed her hands, just as she sank out of sight. A terribly powerful current pulled me in deep and quickly separated us. "Mommy!" Brayden wriggled over the ledge and fell beside me, gasping in pain as his ankle rolled. He slapped the hands away and violently pulled at the hair. The music abruptly cut. All the hands suddenly fell limp and retracted, floating like dead fish. Brayden looked at me. Tears streaked his face, and his breath hitched. "Don't come after us again." The hands sprang to life, terribly pale and inhumanly long. Before I could react, they pulled him under. "No!" I tried to reach into the puddle, but only met hard wood floor. I punched it, sending up pathetic little splashes of stagnant water and pulpy rot. Fury overtook me. I stood and charged to the back of the room, to the bookcase, to that door, to whatever made that awful music, to whatever had stolen my family. Blindly light suddenly engulfed me, bright and yellow as noon's eyes. I tripped and went sprawling to the ground. Under my hands and knees, I felt warm grass. I opened my eyes. I was back in my yard. It was midday again. A colorful catastrophe of flowers filled the garden. Bumblebees drifted past as birds sang. My car waited in the driveway, coated with dust and pollen. Crying, I got into the car. My phone was in the cup holder. To my surprise, it was less than 5% battery. It had been in high 90s when I drove over here. Worse, I I had over 100 missed calls and as many texts, all from Mariah and my boss. The reason soon became apparent. According to the calendar app, I'd been gone for days. I drove to Mariah's house immediately. She wasn't there, which made sense. It was the middle of the day on Friday. She'd be at work. I put my phone on the charger and immediately called her work number. She didn't answer, so I left a message. I've been waiting on her couch since. Amazingly enough, I actually fell asleep for a little while. When I woke up, The People Who Come After You was on the coffee table. I opened it and found one new page. It's crowded with dozens of shadow figures, frozen in a morass of frenzied violence. The text beneath it reads, "You might not win. It's very true." So here's an important clue. If Noon first eats the others use, you'll find the people who come after you. I don't know what to think. I looked up local property records. Sure enough, despite all memories to the contrary, I bought the house in 2015. I was the only buyer. Though maybe I'm insane, but if my husband and children were pulled out of existence, of course his name wouldn't show on any legal documents. I'd be inclined to think I was crazy. If it weren't for the book and for the marks on my arms and legs, my skin is covered in bruises, welts. Some are long and thin, some are shaped like odd long finger hands. Maybe I should let go, accept that I escaped Noon, whatever he is, and go on with my life. But I don't want to leave anyone behind, even if I don't remember them. I have kids. They're trapped there because of me. I can't leave them. According to the book, there are some other versions of me. Feeding them to Noon is my only hope. If quantum self-cannibalism is what it takes to save my family, I guess I'll do it. Wow, that was interesting. Well, I guess that's it for this week's video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tune in next week for a new video. Maybe even this week. Maybe I'll do a double upload this week. I don't know. Maybe this is the second upload this week. I don't really know. I don't know. We'll find out. Bye.